This is Far From Home. I'm Scott Gurian. When I made plans to launch this fourth season of my podcast, I had a whole bunch of stories lined up that I gathered in my travels over the past few years and was planning to share with all of you. But now, I'll be honest, the election of Donald Trump has thrown a bit of a wrench in some of my plans. Suddenly, on an almost daily basis, it feels like there are tons of breaking international developments that I should be covering, given the nature of my show. The thing is, while I consider myself a journalist, making this podcast isn't my full-time job, so I unfortunately don't have the time and resources to always drop everything to report on the latest details of how decisions in Washington are affecting people in Ukraine or Gaza, for example. And also, I'm not sure that I even want to make this a program that just responds to events in the news, because there are lots of other podcasts that already do that far better than I can. At the same time, I don't want to come across as tone-deaf and irrelevant or make it seem like I'm hiding under a rock while the world is burning around me. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to try my best to maintain a balance between sometimes finding interesting ways to report on everything that's going on internationally, while also going ahead with releasing many of the stories I previously planned to release. Some of them, like what you'll hear today, are kind of fun and lighthearted, but the daily news often feels so depressing nowadays that I feel like all of us could probably use a break from time to time just to preserve our sanity. I'm in the midst of working on an episode about how the cuts to USAID are affecting people around the world, and I'll have that for all of you in a few weeks, but in the meantime, I wanted to share another story I produced a few years ago for Here and There, a Canadian geographic travel podcast. I won't say too much about it, except to add a disclaimer that on the face of it, it initially seems like it might just be a story about sports, but please don't let that scare you if you, like me, are not a sports fan, because this is actually about a much deeper issue concerning the culture and identity of the people of the Canadian province of Quebec. So I hope you find this interesting. Without further ado, here's the program's host, Liz Beattie.
Welcome to Here and There, a Canadian geographic travel podcast. I'm your host, Liz Beattie. Today, contributing producer Scott Gurian takes us to Montreal, a city often split between different languages and cultures. But Scott, I think you'll agree, there's one thing that almost everyone there can get behind, cheering on their Montreal Canadiens. What a great assignment for a die-hard hockey fan.
Yeah, I guess it would be for sure. Unfortunately, that's not me. I mean, I grew up in New Jersey and we have the New Jersey Devils, but hockey in the U.S. just isn't what it is in Canada. And even though there are some Americans who follow it, I've never been much of a hockey fan myself. So, full disclosure, before this assignment, I think I'd maybe been to like 2 hockey games in my life, and those were when I was a kid. Now I've been to 3, and weirdly, I think all this may have made me the ideal person to ask the big question.
Which is?
How does hockey define this city and this province? I mean, compared to any other sports-crazed town. Like, why is the love of hockey so uniquely primal to fans in Montreal?
So you are that truly objective outsider, tackling a hockey story that's really about so much more than hockey. Where do we start?
So I should preface this by saying there's not total consensus on hockey's origin story. Some say it dates back to the 1600s and the First Nations Mi'kmaq people of Nova Scotia. Their game Ricket was played with carved cherrywood sticks and round stones. But yeah, for the modern professional game, it was clear where I had to go.
Okay then, Scott, let's go.
I've come to Montreal to figure out why this city has such a deep and abiding love for the sport of ice hockey, and I'm starting in what might seem like kind of an unusual place. I'm on the sidewalk across the street from a parking garage. I see around me an Alamo car rental. There's a Japanese restaurant and a 1-hour photo place. I didn't know those even still existed. It doesn't look like much, but stick with me here because this place is actually really significant. This was the site of the Victoria skating rink, which opened in 1862 and was once called one of the finest covered rinks in the world. It was the first building in all of Canada to be electrified, and it was here on March 3rd, 1875, that the first ever documented organized indoor ice hockey match took place.
It really wasn't like today's game at all. In fact, if someone from that 1875 to 1880 era watch today's game, they might not even recognize it.
Earl Zuckerman is the sports information officer at McGill University and a hockey historian. One of Canada's oldest, most prestigious universities, McGill is connected to the very beginning of the modern game of hockey. Gridiron football and basketball too, weirdly. But back to hockey.
It was almost like golf or polo. Because they were playing with this round rubber lacrosse ball, it was quite dangerous to any spectators. Because, as you know, the ball bounces, and it's very easy to injure someone. So, as the story goes, a McGill student suggested they cut the top off of the rubber ball and the bottom. And that was the first form of a rubber puck.
In those early days, he says it was sort of a free-for-all.
You could have 20, 30, 40 people playing in one game. Once the game was moved indoors, all of a sudden there was dimensions to the size of the ice surface. So they created rules to limit how many players could play per side. And they put in a rule right from the start that the goalie couldn't lie down. Because if the goalie laid down across the goal line, couldn't score. Nobody could lift the puck in that era.
Over time, the regulations were formalized and the sport took off. Devoted fans, meanwhile, nicknamed their team the Habs, short for Les Habitants, as in the original inhabitants of the area now known as Quebec. And though Victoria Rink eventually closed in 1925, the city's residents remain proud even today of their claim to fame that Montreal is where it all began. But Earl says there was a rough period early on when being proud wasn't always easy.
The Canadiens, they've been around since 1909. They formed the NHL. They were one of the founding teams in 1917. And the Canadiens were not very well thought of in the late 1930s. That was a team that was on the verge of bankruptcy. The fans weren't coming out. They weren't doing well. And they were in rough shape. And then all of a sudden, Maurice Richard joined the NHL in 1942, the Rocket. And that really sort of sparked the flame for greatness.
There he is, in the net, scoring a goal for the Montreal Canadiens. Number 9 is one of the most famous players the game has ever had, Maurice the Rocket Richard.
With the help of Richard and other hockey greats like John Beliveau, the Habs won 5 consecutive Stanley Cups between 1956 and 1960, which had never been done before or since. They'd go on to win 10 more times in the 60s and 70s, which is unparalleled in the history of the NHL, and the team also sent the most players to the Hall of Fame. Even though it's now been several decades since their last Stanley Cup victory, that winning history continues to carry them through. So, given all that, I now understand why hockey is so popular in Montreal, but as I'll discover, that's just the starting point. This fandom has deep roots in the culture and identity of Montrealers that's different from pretty much anywhere else. So it seems like a good time to connect with one of these superfans, and Jack Gurevich is about as big of a Habs fan as there is. The word is he's got this massive collection of Canadiens memorabilia amassed over the past 30 years. I got in touch, and he agreed to show it to me.
So this is your museum down here?
Yeah, my wife said I was allowed to have as much hockey crap, as she calls it, as I want, as long as I put it behind like a door where she doesn't have to see it.
She not a hockey fan?
No, not a hockey fan. So this is my little shrine. This is my little oasis where I come and relive my youth and enjoy. I think that's the best way of putting it.
Here in the basement of his suburban Montreal home is a room jam-packed with every sort of hockey artifact imaginable.
I used to stand outside and get autographs. So these are autographs. This binder is A, so family name ending in A, to L. We have game use skates. Then I'll move over here to jerseys.
Wow, you have enough to outfit a whole team here.
In 2003, Jack heard about a contest the team was running to pick their Fan of the Year, so he decided to submit an essay.
And I had, I think it was 150 words to say why I was the biggest Montreal Canadiens fan. And I wrote it very much like these old MasterCard commercials. 1,500 autograph cards, 200 autograph hockey pucks, 24 game-use sticks. And I listed off, and one of the ones I said is having a fiancé who believes hockey is more important to me than her. She's right. Go Habs go. And that's how I ended it. And the funny story is I called my wife the day that I submitted this. I said, sweetie, I just want you to know I wrote an essay for a contest Don't worry, I'm not going to win. Nothing's going to come of it. I said hockey's more important to me than you. It's not true. I did that for, the purpose. Anyhow, all of that to say, I won. And the funny part was that I called up my wife and I said, by the way, remember that essay I wrote where I said, hockey's more important to me than you and nobody will see it? So I won. And it's going to be, on the website, and they're expecting about 1 million hits. And I love you. Sorry. She was pretty cool about it. Part of my prize package was...
It felt like Jack could continue sharing hockey stories for days on end, but I had another important part of my research to tackle.
I am on the west part of the island of Montreal. I'm in Kirkland, and I've come here to Excellent Ice. I'm told this is the rink where pretty much everyone who's learned to play ice hockey on the western part of the island has gotten their start over the last few decades. So here to get a lesson.
Brent Sabino is the manager of Excellent Ice, and I'd arranged by email for him to teach me a sort of hockey 101, but I'm embarrassed to say I showed up woefully unprepared.
Good to meet you. Hi there.
Nice to meet you
Yes,
as well.
good to meet you.
Yeah. Do you have equipment?
I had no idea what. No, was I supposed to? I don't play hockey normally, so I don't have any equipment. I didn't. I'm sorry. I should have asked. I didn't know what.
Okay, so let's see. What size feet are you?
I'm like 12.
Oh yeah. Ooh.
I know. Sorry.
He rummages around to see what he could find and returns a few minutes later with some promising news.
John that works here, he has his skates.
Okay.
Says they're about an 11, but maybe we could try them and see.
Yeah, it's
so
worth
he's
a
just
shot.
going to go get them out of the car.
Okay, thank you.
Thankfully, John's skates fit, and Brent manages to round up some other gear as well. Finally, I'm ready.
I am all suited up. I've got my skates on. I've got my shin pads on. And my helmet. This is like a serious helmet with a big cage in front of my face to protect me from a flying puck. And I've got my gloves. These are like some serious gloves. Okay, and here we go.
As he walks me over, Brent explains that he has 3 rinks, and they're all 2/3 the size of a traditional hockey rink. Great for players who are still learning the ropes. Players just like me.
So one important thing when you're just right now is be loose.
Be loose.
Don't be stiff. Bend your knees.
Okay.
And just have one hand on your stick.
Okay.
Just go.
To start, he has me practice skating back and forth. The problem is, although I could sort of skate, there's one important skill I realized I haven't yet mastered.
Now, should we attempt to stop?
Yeah, I was worried about that.
Okay, so when you stop,
Yeah.
all you do is you just put some weight on your leg.
And kind of turn.
That's it.
Okay.
So you see I go.
Okay, so let me practice stopping then.
Yeah, okay, we'll just go this way.
Okay. Ooh, ow. My first tumble, yeah. Oh man, ow.
After an hour or so practicing passing the puck back and forth and shooting it into the net, my lesson is over, and I step back off of the ice.
Wow. It's nice to be standing back on ground that doesn't move underneath you. Never realized how much I take solid ground for granted.
I hope you're enjoying this episode of Far From Home. I wanted to take a quick moment here to recommend another podcast that I think some of you might like. It's called The Europeans, and each week Dominic, Katie, and the rest of their crew break down the latest news as well as updates on politics and culture from around the European continent. It's one of the shows that's always in my podcast queue, and I've learned about tons of fascinating stories that haven't gotten much attention where I am on the American side of the Atlantic. Plus, it's produced by a team in Paris, Warsaw, and Amsterdam, so you're sure to hear lots of local insights and different perspectives. So check out The Europeans wherever you get your podcasts. So I'm ready to accept that maybe I don't have a future in hockey, but that's okay, because I'm meeting lots of people who follow the Canadiens, even though they don't play themselves. People like author and comedian Leah Streliski, who tells me that Montreal has a way of turning even reluctant sports fans like herself into Habs aficionados. Leah has a 10-year-old son who loves to play with his friends in makeshift alleyway ice rinks in Montreal's Plateau Montreal neighborhood where they live.
I mean, every little boy, I'm sure, dreams of being in the Habs. Like, as a 10-year-old, you're like, yeah, that's my job. I'm just going to do that. I'm going to be in the NHL. And I was speaking with my best friend's husband how there comes a point in a Montrealer's life, like as a 30-year-old man, you have to be like, I think it's not going to happen. Like, it's kind of you have to mourn that. So that's also part of being a citizen of this city.
So a little aside about that. This love for the Habs among its youngest fans is perhaps best captured in Roch Carrier's famous children's book, The Hockey Sweater. It tells the story of Roch's childhood in rural Quebec when he and his friends used to play hockey on a frozen pond, all adorned with Canadiens jerseys bearing the name and number of their idol, Maurice Richard. One day, Roch's mother, who only spoke French, ordered a new jersey for him by mail, but due to a translation error, they accidentally sent him a jersey from the rival team, the Toronto Maple Leafs.
It was one of the greatest disappointments in my life. With tears in my eyes, I summoned up the strength to say, I never wear that uniform. Why? This sweater is a perfect fit. Maurice Richard would never wear it.
When Roch returned to the rink wearing his blue Maple Leafs jersey, he felt totally humiliated. So then he went to the church and prayed for God to send 100 million moths to come and eat it. The Hockey Sweater is a book that pretty much every kid in Quebec grew up reading. In fact, Leah Streliski says her son's school even passed out copies to all the students one year. But even with her son's infatuation, Leah readily admits she was never much of a hockey fan. Recently, however, all that changed.
Because of the pandemic, I just started being obsessed. I had nothing to do, and I started watching the games with my son. Montreal is such a hockey city that if you start picking it up, very soon you'll be just overwhelmed with informations and stats and facts and stories, and so you can't just join a little bit. It's very easy to get addicted, basically.
After becoming obsessed, she began tweeting about the Habs regularly to her tens of thousands of followers, and it caught many of them off guard.
People were surprised. Like, at first they thought I was kidding. They thought I was pretending to like hockey. And then eventually people were like, no, I think she really does like it.
That led to an invitation from the city's biggest newspaper, and suddenly she found herself appearing in the hockey section, which she never imagined would happen in a million years. But she's quick to say she's not a traditional sports writer.
If I hate their jerseys and I think they look stupid wearing it, I'll say it, because it's just a feeling. That's what's fun. I am not trying to be intelligent. I'm just trying to convey raw emotions about I want my team to win.
Leah says she's seen many people like herself who've started to follow hockey more closely during these last few years of COVID, especially during the 2021 season when the Canadiens ended up making it all the way to the Stanley Cup final, only to lose to the Tampa Bay Lightning. She's still feeling bitter about that, by the way, because she jokes that a team from Florida has no right to win in a sport involving ice. But more importantly, as a resident of Montreal, she has a deep conviction that this is her sport. Because you see, as much as this is a story about hockey, it's also about something much greater than that.
There's been language wars in the city between Anglophones and Francophones, and we really had to lay down some laws to protect the French language. And Maurice Richard, who was a great Habs player, he embodied that because he fought as a Francophone. And then he brought that whole generation to stand up for themselves, basically.
To understand what Leah means here, I needed to understand the world of French Canadians in the 1940s and 50s.
You know, at that time, they were more poor than the immigrants who came to Montreal. It was really frustrating to be the lowest of the low in your own society, where you are the majority of their people, and even the new ones make a better life than you.
Emmanuel Lapierre is a historian who writes about hockey and Quebecois nationalism. He says French Canadians often earned less and were treated as second-class citizens. They also faced a lot of discrimination, including in the NHL, where it was hard for French-speaking players to make it to the professional league. Enter again Habs icon Maurice the Rocket Richard, the oldest of 8 kids raised in a poor family during the Depression.
It was like the whole nation put its dreams and hopes in him because he was the best man in the league, despite all that discrimination against him. I mean, even the referees were against him.
Given the tension in the air, it was only a matter of time before things exploded.
It was because of Richard that Montreal was turned inside out on March 17, 1955. League President Clarence Campbell had suspended Richard from the Stanley Cup Series for striking an official, and the Montreal fans were outraged.
From an English-Canadian point of view, the riot was just about hockey and an unfair decision of the league to suspend Maurice Richard.
It was one of the wildest uprisings in sports history. Police arrested 74. 25 others were treated in hospitals for injuries, including Campbell himself.
Of course, for the French-speaking media, there was something more to it. It became a symbol in the history of the Quebecois people of the rising of a nation, that had enough.
To Emmanuel, it's clear why Habs fans are some of the most devoted in the entire NHL.
The team was really more than a hockey club to them. It symbolized a nation because the Quebecois people are a nation, but they don't possess the things that usually a nation have that make it real in the world. So let's say, for example, a national anthem. We don't have that. Money. We don't have that. There is no Quebecois team that goes to the Olympics. That does not exist. So what the Quebecois did, they put their desire to make the nation exist, they put it into a hockey club.
Now it all makes sense. When I first got this assignment, I figured this would just be about sports fanatics like you see in every large city. But Emmanuel has given me a much greater appreciation for how profound the ties to this team really are. It's my last night in the city, and to really understand hockey culture, of course, I need to attend a game. So I meet up at a restaurant with some die-hard fanatics. Mario Lambert, who's had season tickets for longer than he could remember, and 2 of his good friends.
My name is François Girard, and I'm Jean-Pierre's brother, who's right here.
So I'm Jean-Pierre Girard, and I'm the brother of François, who's right there. The 3 of us are big fan of hockey. Like if I take my brother, we started playing together hockey. I think he was 4, I was 8. He was too small to play, so I put him in the goals, and he became a goaltender.
Because of my brother, I got recruited in the AAA Pee Wee, which was a pretty serious league. So we would wake up 3 times a week before school. Jean-Pierre would drive me there. So, a long story short, we play in quarterfinals against Kingston, and the Coliseum is full. I'm 12 years old, and I'm goaltending that game. It's 1-1. In the last seconds of the third period, I got a triple breakthrough, and then I stopped once, twice, and then when I put my glove on it, the whole place goes on fire. And I think the day I die, I remember that moment.
After grabbing a bite to eat and being regaled with a few more of their all-time greatest hits of hockey stories, I joined them as they walked around the corner to the Bell Center and settled into their seats. As we were waiting for the game to start, I asked Francois about his favorite part of the experience.
Imagine we're in playoffs on a good year of the Habs, and in a crucial moment, very tense moment, there's a goal. That's very satisfying. It's 20,000 human beings sharing a very extreme emotion at the same time, It's a live or die right there at the moment. You can hear disappointment. You can hear disagreements. You hear all sorts of things. That's rich. I find it rich.
And I have to say, even though I'm not a hockey fan myself, once the game began, I did find something electrifying about being there. JP told me he felt the same way.
The way I see it is the intensity of the crowd. Okay, so the reaction, you don't get it on TV. On TV, you have, in a sense, a better show because they give you all the replays and everything. But here, what I like is the crowd calls the offside. They call the penalties. They call everything. So The intelligence of the crowd makes me come to the game.
Unfortunately, it's not their night. The Habs lose 3-0 to the New York Islanders. This looks like the end of their season, and JP's brother Francois isn't taking it well. But even in their loss, I still get good first-hand experience of what the team means to its fans. In this arena, on this night, it's palpable. Mario, JP, Francois, and I retreat to Mario's pied-à-terre nearby to debrief and lick our wounds.
Not a bad game.
I don't accept this result.
Look at the guy.
I like your attitude. You're going to be part of the team next year.
Okay, so to Scott.
Yeah, Scott.
Our new friend.
Yeah.
It's difficult not to share the pain of my new friends, and to think of how close their beloved Habs came to clinching the cup just the year before. The mood tonight is a far cry from Montreal hip-hop star Anakin Slade's song Rock the Sweater, which was an anthem to Habs fans' hopes and dreams for their near-perfect 2021 season. But I thought back to something Earl Zuckerman from McGill had told me when we spoke. He said that even in the hard times, the team's past victories remain cemented in the memory of all Montrealers. So, yeah, they might be down right now, but they'll be back. And like every Habs fan this night, I can't help but think, maybe next year.
When I'm feeling like I want to show the world what greatness is. Red and blue and white sweater, the CH it is. When I want to feel the ghosts of the legends, I rock my vintage old school Marin 7. When I want to show we got way more cups than your team. Turn around and flash my Richard 16. When I give a wink like you can't see me. Bet you I'm wearing my Roi 3. We rock the sweater, we rock it proud. Rock like Carrier, we rock it loud. Red, blue, and white flags fly. We gonna raise that cup up high. Go.
Before I go, I have a few people I want to thank. First of all, a big shout out to Clark McLeod, who connected me with his friend Mario Lambert, and to Mario for being such a great host and bringing me along to a Canadiens game. I also had support from Tourism Montreal, Destination Canada, Herb Medill at Excellent Ice, and journalist Emma Jacobs, who said I just had to interview Leah Streliski, who she called her favorite person on the internet. I appreciate the recommendation. Archival tape came from Classic Sports Pictures and the National Film Board of Canada. Thanks as well to Anakin Slade for use of his song, which you're hearing right now. Here and There is produced by Black Cabin Studio for Canadian Geographic Travel. Finally, I want to give a big shout out to Habs superfan Jack Gurovich, who went above and beyond and is an all-around super nice guy. In fact, I think I'll give him the last word.
Listen, I'm crazy, but I know it, right? So I'm okay. I'm not a serial killer. I'm just a little obsessed with hockey and the Habs.